There are things a mother should never have to do for her own son. But I did them. And today, at 65 years old, after decades of silence, I finally found the courage to tell how my only son turned me into a prisoner in my own home, and how a simple meal changed everything forever. Good afternoon, my dears. My name is Margaret Wilson, but everyone around here calls me Miss Maggie. I was born in March 1959, in a small town in rural Kentucky called Hopeville, where the sun baked the asphalt and everyone knew everyone else's business going back to their great-great-grandparents. I was always a simple woman, the kind who wakes up early to make coffee and goes to bed late after tidying the whole house. I married young, at 19, to Robert Wilson, a hard-working man I met at a church social. He worked at a small auto repair shop downtown, always had grease-stained hands, but the cleanest heart I've ever known. Robert was the kind of man who came home tired, but always with a smile on his face and affection for me. He wasn't a man of many words, but showed love through small gestures, bringing wildflowers home, fixing anything that broke around the house, hugging me around the waist when I was cooking. We tried for years to have children, but nature wasn't cooperating. I went through treatments, prayed to the Lord, lit candles, made promises. Robert always said if God wanted it to happen, it would happen at the right time. And it did. At 25, after 6 years of marriage, I got pregnant with my only son. Jason was born in December 1984, a chubby, healthy boy who rarely cried and smiled often. He was my prince, my treasure, the answer to all my prayers. Robert was so emotional he cried during the delivery, said he was the happiest man in the world. Having been so longed for, maybe we spoiled Jason more than we should have. Anything he wanted, we gave him. Any tantrum, we gave in. Any problem at school, we solved it. I justified it by saying he was an only child, that he deserved all our attention, that we didn't want him to feel lonely. Jason grew up being the center of our lives. Robert worked hard to give him the best: toys, clothes, even a video game console that cost nearly a month's salary. I gave up everything so he wouldn't go without anything. If there was money for new clothes, I bought them for Jason. If there was good fruit, I saved it for him. At school, Jason was always average, not the smartest, but not dumb either. The problem was that he never tried very hard, because he knew that if he got a bad grade, I'd go talk to the teacher, find a way, fix it. He learned early on that there would always be someone to clean up his messes. When he turned 18, Robert tried to encourage him to work. "Son, it's time you learned a trade, become a man," he would say. But Jason always made excuses. He said he wanted to study more, that he hadn't found anything he liked, that the jobs in town didn't pay enough. I always defended my son. "Robert, let the boy find himself. He's still young, there's time." And so the years passed. Jason turned 20, 25, 30, and continued living with us, without working, living off his father's sweat. Folks, leave in the comments what city you're watching this old lady tell her story from. Also tell me your nickname. You can't imagine how it warms my heart to know my words are reaching so far. And if you can, please like and subscribe to our channel. It gives me strength to continue sharing these difficult memories with you. Robert started showing frustration with the situation. Sometimes, when he came home from work and saw Jason lying on the couch watching TV, he would sigh deeply and shake his head. "Margaret, the boy is a grown man now. He can't spend his whole life being supported by us." But I always found justifications. "He's looking for work, honey. The job market is tough. At least he stays home, not getting into trouble." Deep down, I think I liked having my son nearby, continuing to care for him as when he was a child. Jason realized I always defended him and began using it to his advantage. When Robert got angry with him, he'd come looking for me. "Mom, Dad's being unfair to me. I'm trying, but it's not easy to find work." And I, the doting mother I always was, believed him and consoled him. The arguments between father and son became more frequent. Robert saw other men, Jason's age, starting families, buying homes, moving on with life, while our son remained directionless. "He needs a push, Margaret. He needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet." But I was afraid. Afraid Jason would get hurt out there. Afraid he wouldn't be able to manage on his own. Afraid of losing him. So I continued protecting him, continued making things easy, continued being the mother who solves all problems. When Jason turned 35, Robert gave an ultimatum. Either he gets a job by the end of the year or he leaves the house. I can't keep supporting a grown man who doesn't want to work. I was desperate, begged Robert to be patient, but he was firm in his decision. That's when Jason got a job at a department store downtown. It wasn't much, but it was something. Robert was relieved. I was proud. Finally, my son was becoming independent. But it didn't last long. 3 months later, Jason was fired. He said the boss was annoying, that his colleagues didn't like him, that the work was too tiring. Robert was furious, but I, once again, defended my son. He'll find something better. At least he tried. This pattern repeated itself several times. Jason would get a job, work for a few months, then get fired or quit. He always had a justification. It was always someone else's fault, never his. And I always believed him, always defended him, always made excuses. Robert started getting quieter, more distant. Sometimes I caught him looking at Jason with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it sadness? Disappointment? Regret? He never said, but I felt something was changing inside him. In 2015, when Jason was 31, Robert started feeling chest pains. At first, we thought it was fatigue, stress from work, but the pains got worse, and he began having difficulty breathing. When I finally took him to the doctor, the diagnosis was devastating. Serious heart problems. The doctor said Robert needed rest, less stress, special care. I dedicated myself entirely to caring for him. Jason, who was once again unemployed, helped little. Sometimes he'd stay with his father while I went to the grocery store, but complained it was boring, that he didn't know what to talk about with him. Robert became more fragile, more dependent. I watched my husband, who had always been so strong, so hard-working, wasting away gradually. And I also saw that Jason's presence in the house, instead of being a comfort, was a constant source of worry for him. "Margaret," Robert said one afternoon, when he was weaker, "what will happen to Jason when I'm no longer here? He doesn't know how to do anything, doesn't know how to manage on his own. You can't take care of him your whole life." I held his hand, trying to reassure him. "Don't talk like that, honey. You're going to get better, and we'll take care of Jason together. He'll still find his way." But deep down, I was worried too. Jason was 32 and still acting like a teenager. He didn't know how to cook, didn't know how to do laundry, didn't know how to pay bills, didn't know how to handle basic responsibilities of adult life. Robert died on a September morning in 2016. Massive heart attack, the doctor said. There wasn't time to say goodbye, to say last words. He simply closed his eyes and departed, leaving a void in my life that was never filled again. The funeral was simple, as he always wanted. Jason cried a lot, seemed really shaken by the loss of his father. I thought maybe it would mature him, that maybe Robert's death would make him see life differently. But that's not what happened. In the first months after his father's death, Jason became even more dependent on me. He said he was sad, that he couldn't think about work, that he needed time to recover. And I, immersed in my own pain, accepted it. The pension I started receiving from Robert was small, but enough to support us. Jason said he would look for work when he felt better, that he would take care of me like Daddy did. I believed him, as I always had. But as the months passed, I noticed something changing in my son. He was no longer sad about his father's death. He was irritated, bitter, as if life had been unfair to him. He started making strange comments, blaming me for things that had nothing to do with anything. "If you hadn't protected me so much, I would be different," he would say. "If you had forced me to work, I would have learned. Now it's too late. I'm a failure because of you." I was confused by these accusations. How could my love, my protection, my care be blamed for his problems? I only wanted the best for my son, always did. But Jason was convinced I was responsible for all his failures. And worse, he was starting to take out that anger on me. At first, it was just harsh words, looks of contempt, coldness in his treatment. But gradually, the situation escalated to something much worse. It was in late 2016, about 3 months after Robert's funeral, that Jason showed his true face for the first time. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when he came in from outside with a grim expression I had never seen before. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, throwing himself into a chair at the table as if he owned the house. "Go ahead, son. What is it?" "It's about the money, about how things are going to work around here from now on." I stopped stirring the beans and looked at him, not understanding. "What do you mean, Jason?" "You receive $200 in pension from Dad. That has to cover all the house bills and still leave enough for both of us to live on." "I know, son. I'm managing it carefully." "No, Mom, you're not understanding." He stood up and came to where I was, standing very close to me. "I'm going to manage that money now. You don't understand anything about finances." I gave a little laugh, thinking he was joking. "Jason, I've managed this house for 32 years. Your father always left the money with me. Dad was too nice. I'm not." His voice changed, became colder, harder. "You're an old woman. You don't have the head for these things anymore. I'm going to take care of the money from now on." I felt a tightness in my chest. My own son was treating me as if I were incapable, as if I were a child who doesn't know how to take care of herself. "Jason, I'm not old. I'm only 57. And I've always known how to manage our house very well." "Always knew?" He laughed, but it was a cruel laugh. "Then why was there never any money left over? Why did we never manage to save anything? Why did we always live paycheck to paycheck?" "Because your father didn't earn much, son. Because we raised you, because we spent on your needs." "Exactly. You spent badly. That's why now I'm going to control the finances." He held out his hand. "Give me the pension card." I stood still, not knowing what to do. It was my money, my pension, my house. But it was my son asking, and I had always given him everything. "Jason, you don't need to do this. I can continue." "I'm not asking, Mom. I'm telling you." He came even closer, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own son. "The card. Now." With trembling hands, I took the card from my purse and gave it to him. Jason smiled, but it wasn't the affectionate smile I knew. It was the smile of someone who had just won a battle. "Now that's more like it. From today on, things are going to work right in this house." And that's how my hell began. Jason took total control of the house finances. He decided what to buy, when to buy it, how much to spend. I had to ask permission even to buy soap. At first, I tried to argue. "Jason, I need money to go to the store." "How much do you need?" "About $50 to buy the basics." $50? For what? You're spending money badly. Here's 20. It has to be enough. $20 for shopping that cost 50. I had to choose between rice or beans, between beef or chicken. I returned from the store humiliated, with half-full bags, having to explain to the butcher that I couldn't take the meat because I didn't have enough money. When I complained, Jason exploded. "You don't know how to manage anything. That's why Dad died early, from so much stress trying to support this house." Those words hurt me more than any slap. He was blaming his father's death on my incompetence, saying I was responsible for losing my husband. As the months passed, his control increased. It wasn't just the money, it was everything. I had to ask permission to leave the house, to receive visitors, to turn on the TV to the channel I wanted to watch. "Mom, where are you going?" "Just to Miss Betty's house, to see how she's doing." "What for? Don't you have things to do here at home?" "The house is a mess. You're wasting time with neighbors." "Jason, it's just 10 minutes. "No, you stay here. There's laundry to wash, house to clean, no more slacking off." Slacking off. Visiting a 60-year-old neighbor was slacking off. Gradually, I lost contact with people. Miss Betty stopped coming to see me because Jason always found an excuse to send me inside the house when she arrived. The humiliations escalated. He started treating me as if I were a servant in my own home. "Mom, where's my food? It's lunchtime." "I'm just finishing, son." "Just finishing? What time is it?" 12:30. "Lunch is at noon. You're getting lazy." I would rush to serve his plate, apologizing, promising that the next day would be different. But it was never good enough. There was always something wrong, some reason for him to complain. The food was bland. It was too salty. It was cold. It was too hot. The house was messy. I was making noise. I was too quiet. Always, always something. In 2017, things got even worse. Jason started touching me in ways that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't explicit violence, but it was something that made me feel bad. He would pinch me jokingly, but squeeze hard, leaving purple marks on my arm. "Oh, Mom, you're too sensitive. It's just a joke." He'd push me when he passed me in the kitchen. "Get out of the way, Mom. You're always in the way." The push was hard, made me lose my balance, but he talked as if it were normal. When I complained, he rolled his eyes. "Mom, you're exaggerating. It wasn't that bad. You're getting paranoid." Paranoid, sensitive, exaggerating. He always had a word to make me feel guilty for complaining about the mistreatment he himself caused. The worst were the comments. He started calling me useless old lady, as if it were an affectionate nickname. "Hey, useless old lady, where's my blue shirt?" "Jason, I don't like when you talk to me like that." "Talk like what?" "It's a joke, Mom. You have no sense of humor." Useless old lady turned into dead weight. "This woman is a dead weight in my life. Good for nothing, just a drain on money." He would say this in front of me, as if I weren't there. Sometimes, when a neighbor came by, he would say these things to humiliate me publicly. "Look here, Mr. Johnson, my mom burned the beans again. This old lady can't even cook. I'm the one who has to put up with her." Mr. Johnson would be embarrassed, try to change the subject, but I saw in his eyes the pity, the compassion for a woman who was being mistreated by her own son. In 2018, Jason invented a system of punishments for my mistakes. If I left something out of place, if I took too long to serve food, if I did anything he considered wrong, I was punished. The punishments were simple, but humiliating. He would forbid me from watching the soap opera I liked. "Today, you won't watch your stupid little show. You'll think about what you did." Or he would forbid me from going out to the yard. "You stay inside the house today. I don't want to see you outside." Or the worst of all, he would eat in front of me and not let me eat. "Tonight you have bread and water for dinner. Maybe that way you'll learn not to irritate me." I would sit at the table, watching my son eat the dinner I had prepared, while my stomach growled with hunger. When he finished, he would go watch TV, and I would stay there, humiliated, hungry, wondering how I had reached that point. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up and cry softly so he wouldn't hear. I cried for Robert, who was no longer there to defend me. I cried for myself, for having allowed it to get to that point. I cried for the son I thought I had raised, who never really existed. But in the morning, I would get up and do it all over again. Prepare his coffee, wash his clothes, clean the house, because he was my son. Because I didn't know how to do anything else. Because I was afraid of being alone. Jason realized I wasn't going to react, that I would accept everything silently, and that encouraged him to go further. The pinches got stronger. The shoves got more violent. The insults got crueler. "You're a disgusting old woman," he would say when I sweated cooking in the heat. "You can't even take a bath properly." "You're stupid, Mom. Stupid and useless. I don't know how Dad put up with you for so long. You should have died instead of him. At least he was good for something." These words cut deeper than any knife. My own son wishing for my death, saying I was worthless, that Robert had married the wrong person. In 2019, things escalated to a level I never imagined possible. Jason started hitting me for real. They weren't just pinches or shoves anymore. They were slaps, punches in the arm, hair pulling. "You're making me nervous, Mom. You know I don't like it when you make me nervous." He spoke as if it were my fault, as if I forced him to hit me, as if I deserved every slap, every punch, every humiliation. I didn't tell anyone. I was ashamed. I was afraid. I had the illusion that I could change him, that I could win back the son I thought I had raised. But that son never existed. What existed was a 35-year-old man, an adult, who had chosen to torture his own mother as a way to take out his frustrations with life. And the worst was yet to come. Because in June 2019, Jason crossed a line I never thought he would cross. That was when he forced me to do something a mother should never be forced to do, for her own son. Before continuing the story, I want to see who's really watching me up to this point. Comment below the word family. Now, let's continue. It was on a Tuesday in late June 2019 that my life changed forever. I remember the day perfectly because it was my sister Claire's birthday, who lives in Cincinnati. I wanted so badly to call her, But Jason had cut off the landline 3 months earlier, saying it cost too much money, and my cell phone was out of minutes. "Jason, can I use your cell phone to call my sister? Just 2 minutes to wish her happy birthday." "No, my cell phone isn't a public payphone. You want to talk to her? Work and buy your own minutes." Work? Me, a 60-year-old woman whom he wouldn't even let leave the house alone? But I didn't say anything. I had learned that arguing with him only made things worse. That day, I was particularly nervous. I had woken up with a bad headache, the kind that feels like your head is going to explode. Maybe it was high blood pressure. Maybe it was the stress of living in that hell. I don't know. I just know my hands were shakier than normal. Jason woke up in a bad mood, as had become routine. He came down to the kitchen already huffing, already looking for something to nitpick. "Where's my coffee? What time is it?" "It's 7:30, son. It's almost ready." "Almost ready? What the hell is almost ready? I have commitments today." Commitments. He didn't work, didn't study, didn't do anything with his life. What commitments could he have? But I didn't ask. I had learned that questioning him was asking to be humiliated. I served the coffee trembling, trying not to spill anything. He ate in silence, but I felt his eyes observing me, looking for some flaw, some reason to explode. "This bread is stale," he said, throwing a piece on the plate forcefully. "I bought it yesterday, son. It's fresh." "Fresh? It's hard as a rock. You don't even know how to choose bread at the store." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 as I always did. "I'll buy another one today, son." "Buy it with what money? You think money grows on trees?" It was always like this. He would complain about something, but when I offered to fix it, he would complain about the money. A vicious cycle that had no end. After breakfast, he went to his room to watch TV. I started cleaning the house, trying not to make noise to avoid irritating him. I vacuumed, mopped, organized everything. When I finished, it was almost noon. "Jason, I'm going to start making lunch. What do you want to eat?" "Make rice, beans, ground beef, and French fries. And don't burn anything today." I went to the kitchen and started preparing everything. The headache was getting worse, and my hands were shaking more and more. I put the rice on the stove, the beans in the pressure cooker, prepared the ground beef, peeled the potatoes. While cooking, I kept thinking about my life. How had I reached this point? How had a woman who was always respected, who raised a son, who had a happy marriage, become a prisoner in her own home? At 1:30 in the afternoon, the food was ready. I called Jason for lunch. He came down with a grim face, as always. He sat at the table waiting to be served like a king. That's when it happened. I was serving his plate, with my hands shaking because of the headache and nerves. When I went to put the ground beef on the plate, a little fell on the table. It was a small spoonful, almost nothing. Any normal person would clean it with a napkin, and that would be it. But Jason wasn't a normal person. He was a monster disguised as a son. He looked at the meat that had fallen on the table, then looked at me. His eyes changed, became dark, filled with a rage I had never seen before. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, getting up from the chair abruptly. "I'm sorry, son. My hands are shaking today. I'll clean it." "Clean it? Clean it?" He yelled so loudly I was afraid the neighbors would hear. "You're throwing food away, wasting my money." "It wasn't on purpose, Jason. It was just a little." "A little? A little?" He took the plate I was serving and threw it on the kitchen floor. The plate shattered, scattering food everywhere. "Look what you did! Look at the mess!" I started crying. I couldn't control it anymore. The headache, the fear, the constant humiliation, it all came together in that moment. "Stop crying," he shouted, approaching me. "You're going to clean this mess up now." "I will, son. I'll clean everything." "No, you don't understand." He grabbed me by the arm, squeezing hard. "You're going to clean it on your knees, like the animal you are." My heart almost stopped. "Jason?" "On your knees," he shouted, pushing me to the floor. "You act like a pig? Then you'll clean like a pig." I fell to my knees on the kitchen floor, in the middle of that scattered food. My pants got dirty. My knees hit the cold floor. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. "Clean it," he ordered, standing beside me like a soldier watching a prisoner. "Clean up all this mess you made." With trembling hands, I began gathering the broken pieces of the plate. Some shards cut my fingers, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. He was there watching my every move. Faster! You think I have all day to watch you? I gathered the pieces of the plate, cleaned up the scattered food. But when I finished and tried to get up, he pushed me back to the floor. Who said you could get up? You're not done yet. I am done, son. Everything's clean. No, you're not. He took my plate, which was still intact on the table, and threw it on the floor too. Now you're going to eat, off the floor. Like the animal you are. I looked at him, not believing what I was hearing. Jason, for God's sake, eat! He shouted, pointing to the food on the floor. You waste food, then you'll eat off the floor. Go! At that moment, something died inside me. It wasn't just the food that was on the floor. It was my dignity, my self-respect, my humanity. My own son was treating me like an animal. Jason, I'm your mother, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My mother? My mother would be a dignified person, not a useless old woman who's good for nothing. He crouched down, getting to my level. You want to be treated like a person, then act like a person. Until then, you're less than a dog. I looked at the food on the floor. Rice, beans, ground beef, all mixed with the shards of the plate. It was nauseating. It was degrading. It was the most humiliating thing anyone could do to another human being. I'm waiting, he said, crossing his arms. Either you eat now, or you don't eat today, and tomorrow, and the day after, until you learn not to waste food. I closed my eyes, trying to find strength, trying to remember who I was before all this, trying to find the strong woman who raised a son, who managed a household, who had a dignified life, but I couldn't find her. I only found a broken, humiliated woman who no longer had the strength to fight, a woman who had become a prisoner of her own son. And then, with trembling hands, I bent down and started eating. Off the floor, like an animal. Tears dripped onto the food as I chewed. The taste was horrible, not just because of the dirt, but because of the humiliation. Each bite was a part of my soul being destroyed. Jason stood there watching. Sometimes he would give a little laugh, as if it were the most amusing thing in the world. Other times he would sigh, impatient, as if I were taking too long. Faster. I'm waiting to watch my program. I tried to eat faster, but my stomach was in knots. Several times I wanted to vomit, but I swallowed the nausea along with the food. I couldn't stop. I couldn't displease him anymore. When I finished, he bent down and ran his hand through my hair, as if I were a dog that had obeyed a command. See? When you behave, things flow better. Now get up and clean this mess properly. I got up with difficulty. My legs were numb from being on my knees for so long. My mouth was dirty. My face was swollen from crying so much. And take a shower. You stink. He left the kitchen whistling, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just completely destroyed his own mother's dignity. I stood there, in the middle of the kitchen, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to continue living after that, not knowing how to look at myself in the mirror. I cleaned the kitchen in silence, mechanically. I gathered the remaining shards, mopped the floor, washed the dishes. All on autopilot, because my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about how I had reached that point. How a mother who gave everything for a son could be treated that way. How the unconditional love I felt for him could be so poorly returned. But mainly, I was thinking about one thing. That had been the last time. The last time he would humiliate me like that. The last time I would accept being treated as less than a human being. Because at that moment, there on the kitchen floor, eating like an animal, something inside me awoke. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was something colder, more calculated. It was the determination of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Jason had crossed a line that should not have been crossed. And he didn't know it, but he had just awakened a side of me he had never seen before. The side of a woman who had survived 60 years of life, who had raised a son alone after her husband's death, who had managed a household for decades. As I washed my face in the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, My face was swollen, but there was something different there. A determination that didn't exist before. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the ceiling, planning, thinking, calculating. Jason thought he had completely broken me. He thought I would accept anything from that moment on. But he was wrong, because sometimes when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up, and I had hit my rock bottom that day. Now all that was left was to rise, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. That night, after what happened in the kitchen, I didn't sleep a wink. I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, feeling something strange growing in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was something colder, more calculated. It was the certainty that this couldn't continue. Jason had gone to sleep as if nothing had happened. I heard him laughing, watching TV in his room, as if having humiliated his own mother was just another normal day in his life. But for me, that day had changed everything. At 3 a.m, I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I sat in the same chair where everything had happened a few hours before. I looked at the floor where I had been forced to eat, where my dignity had been trampled by my own son. It was at that moment that I made a decision. I would no longer accept it. I would no longer bow my head. I would no longer allow him to treat me like an animal. But I wouldn't do anything impulsive either. Nothing that could harm me later. I began to plan. Jason thought he was smart, that he controlled me completely. But he had underestimated one thing. I was his mother. I knew him better than he knew himself. I knew all his weaknesses, all his fears, all his habits. In the days that followed, I began to observe everything with different eyes. His routine, his schedule, his habits. Jason always woke up at 8 a.m, had breakfast watching TV, then went back to his room. He only came out for lunch and dinner. The rest of the time, he stayed locked in his room, watching movies on the computer. He thought I was just a useless old lady who didn't understand anything about technology, but he forgot that I had worked as a secretary before getting married, that I knew how to use a computer, that I understood more than he imagined. A week after that terrible day while he was sleeping, I went into his room and took his cell phone. I knew the password because I had seen him type it several times. It was 1234, the most obvious thing in the world. Typical of Jason, he thought he was smart, but he was too lazy even to create a decent password. I downloaded a voice recorder app. It took me about 20 minutes to understand how it worked, but I managed. I tested it a few times, recording my own voice, until I was sure I knew how to use it properly. I put the cell phone back in place and returned to my room. My heart was racing, but not from fear. It was from anticipation. For the first time in years, I had a plan. For the first time, I wasn't just a victim. In the days that followed, Jason continued with his normal behavior. Name-calling, humiliations, shoving. But now I endured it all with an internal smile, because I knew that every cruel word he said was being recorded. I hid the cell phone in strategic places around the house. Behind the sugar bowl in the kitchen, under the sofa cushion in the living room, in the pocket of my apron. Always recording, always documenting. You're a disgusting old woman, Mom. You should be ashamed to be alive. Recorded. You're a dead weight in this house, only good for spending money and creating work. Recorded. You should have died instead of Dad. At least he was good for something. Recorded. For 2 weeks, I collected hours of recordings. Insults, humiliations, threats. All documented, all with date and time. Jason had no idea he was creating his own evidence against himself. But I didn't just want the insults. I wanted something more concrete, something that showed his true face. And I knew that sooner or later he would explode again. Men like Jason can't control themselves for long. The opportunity came on a Thursday in July. I was preparing dinner when he came down with a face I knew well. It was the face of someone looking for a fight, of someone wanting to vent their anger on someone. "What's that smell?" he asked, wrinkling his nose. "I'm making fried fish, son. I bought it this morning." "Fish? Who said I wanted fish? You didn't say what you wanted. I thought you might like a change." "Thought? You're not paid to think. You're paid to obey." He slammed his hand on the table hard. "Throw that crap away and make rice, beans, and beef, like always." My heart accelerated. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. The cell phone was recording, hidden behind the sugar bowl. "Jason, the fish is almost done. I can't throw it away, it would be wasteful." "Wasteful?" He exploded, as I knew he would. "You talk about waste? You who waste my money every day?" "Perfect," he was shouting, losing control, everything being recorded in high quality. "You're a stupid old woman, Mom. Stupid! You can't do anything right." He approached me, and I saw in his eyes that rage I knew well, the rage that came before physical aggression. "You're going to throw that fish away now," he shouted, grabbing the frying pan and throwing it on the floor. The hot oil splashed everywhere, some drops burning my leg. "Ouch! Jason, you burned me. Burned you. Good. Maybe that way you'll learn not to contradict me." He pushed me, making me fall sitting on the floor. Then he slapped me across the face. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to leave my cheek red. "Get up and clean this mess, and then make the food right." He left the kitchen stomping, leaving me there on the floor with hot oil still steaming around me. But I wasn't sad. I was triumphant, because everything had been recorded, every shout, every insult, every sound of the aggression. That night, I transferred all the recordings to a flash drive I had kept for years. I organized everything by date, put titles on the folders. Insults, 0715. Physical assault, 07/25. I did a professional job, as if it were a dossier. I also started photographing the marks he left on my body. The bruises from the pinches, the red marks from the shoves, the burn from the oil, all documented, all with dates. Jason was digging his own grave and didn't know it. Each day that passed, I collected more evidence. Each cruelty he committed was one more piece of evidence against him, but I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed something more, something that was so shocking, so indefensible, that no one could doubt what I was saying. That's when I remembered the episode with the food on the floor. That had been the turning point for me, but it hadn't been recorded. I knew Jason would do something similar again. Men like him always escalated the violence. I waited patiently. I continued to be the submissive mother, the woman who bowed her head, who accepted everything silently. But inside, I was changed. Inside, I was planning. At the end of July, it happened. Jason had gone out in the morning, a rare thing because he almost never left the house. When he returned, he had a terrible expression, as if he had argued with someone. "Where's my lunch?" he asked, slamming the door. "It's ready, son. I just need to heat it up." "Heat it up? Why wasn't it hot when I got here?" "Because I didn't know what time you'd be back." "Didn't know? I always have lunch at noon. Always. Your memory is failing, old woman." I quickly heated the food and put it on the table. He sat down with a grim face, looking at the plate as if it were poison. "This food looks old," he said, stirring the rice with the spoon. "Everything bland, tasteless, just like you." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what I knew was going to happen. The cell phone was recording, hidden under the cushion of the chair where I always sat. "I'm sorry, son. Next time I'll do it differently." "Next time? There won't be a next time." He stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "I can't stand this bad food anymore. I can't stand you anymore." He took the plate and threw it on the floor, just like he had done weeks before. The difference is that this time, I was prepared. This time, everything was being documented. "Clean it," he shouted, pointing to the mess. "And eat off the floor again. Since you like making pig food, eat like a pig." My heart raced. It was exactly what I had been waiting for. The same humiliation, but now being recorded. "Jason, please! On your knees!" he roared, pushing me. "Eat off the floor, like the animal you are!" This time, I knew every word was being recorded. Every second of that humiliation was being documented. So I endured it. I endured it because I knew it would be the last time. I ate off the floor again, with tears in my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of contained rage, of justice that was being prepared. "That's it. Now you know your place," he laughed, seeing me humiliated. I should have done this a long time ago. When I finished, he left the kitchen whistling. Little did he know that he had just recorded his own sentence. That night, I listened to the recording several times. It was perfect. You could clearly hear every word, every shout, every sound of the food being thrown on the floor. Anyone who listened to it would be shocked. Now I had everything I needed. Months of recordings, photographs of the aggressions, enough evidence to destroy any defense he might have. But it wasn't time to act yet. There was still one thing to do. I needed to ensure that when the moment came, I would have the maximum impact possible. That's when I remembered Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor who worked as a clerk at the county courthouse. She had always been a fair woman who didn't tolerate violence against women. If anyone could guide me on how to use that evidence, it was her. The next morning, while Jason was sleeping, I went to her house. I explained everything, showed her some recordings. Mrs. Thompson was horrified. "My dear, this is a crime. You need to report him." "I know, Mrs. Thompson, but I want to be sure it will work. I want to be sure he will pay for what he did." She explained to me about the domestic violence laws, about how the process worked, about the rights I had. She also gave me the phone number of a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases. "Margaret, with this evidence, he has no defense. You have enough material to put him in jail." Jail. The word echoed in my head. My own son, in jail. Part of me felt sorry, felt remorse. But then I remembered the taste of the food on the floor, the humiliation, the pain, and the pity passed. I returned home with a complete plan. I knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Jason had dug his own grave, and now I was going to bury him in it. But before executing the plan, I needed one more thing. I needed him to feel completely safe, completely in control. Because the fall would be much more painful when he realized he had no control at all. In the days that followed, I became the perfect mother. Submissive, obedient, silent. Jason was satisfied, thinking he had broken me definitively, thinking I would never react again. But what he didn't know was that I was just preparing to deliver the final blow, the blow that would change our lives forever. I chose a Sunday in early August to execute my plan. Sunday because he always slept in, because he was more relaxed, because he believed he had total control over me. Sunday because it would be the last day he would spend in that house. I woke up at 5 in the morning, as I always did. But this time, it was different. It wasn't the awakening of a defeated woman, ready for another day of humiliation. It was the awakening of a warrior who was about to reclaim her dignity. I went to the kitchen with firm steps. I prepared a special breakfast, fresh bread, butter, strawberry jam, freshly brewed coffee. Everything the way Jason liked it. It would be his last meal in that house, so I made sure it was perfect. As the coffee brewed, I mentally organized everything I needed to say. I had rehearsed that moment for weeks. I knew exactly every word I would say, every pause I would make. I couldn't make a mistake. I couldn't show weakness. At 8:30, I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs. My heart accelerated, but not from fear, from anticipation. After months of being humiliated, mistreated, trampled on, it was finally my turn. "Good morning, Mom," he said, entering the kitchen with that just woken up face. "Smells good." "Good morning, son. I prepared a special breakfast for you." He sat at the table, waiting to be served as always. I put the plate in front of him, poured the hot coffee. He started eating without even thanking me, as if it were my obligation to serve him. But this time, I didn't stand waiting for orders. I sat in the chair across from him, something I hadn't done in years. Jason raised his eyes, surprised. "Why are you sitting? Don't you have anything to do?" "Yes, I do. I have something very important to tell you." He continued eating, not giving much importance. "Say it then. I have things to do later." I took a deep breath, looked into his eyes, and said the words I had rehearsed so many times. "Jason, I called the police." He stopped chewing. He looked at me with a confused expression, as if he hadn't understood correctly. "What did you say?" "I said I called the police. They're coming here in 10 minutes. Now he stopped eating completely. He put the bread on the plate, stared at me with that look I knew well, the look of someone getting angry. "Police? Police for what? Are you going crazy, old woman?" "I'm not crazy, Jason. I'm lucid for the first time in years." My voice was calm, firm. "I called the police because I have proof that you've been assaulting me, humiliating me, and mistreating me for years." He gave a laugh, but it was a nervous laugh. "Proof? What proof? You're making this up in your head." That's when I took the cell phone from my apron pocket. The same cell phone he used every day, not knowing I had installed a recorder on it. "This proof," I said, placing the device on the table. I pressed play and his voice filled the kitchen. "You're a disgusting old woman, Mom. You should be ashamed to be alive." His face went pale. He looked at the cell phone, then at me, then at the cell phone again. That's nothing. They're just words." I pressed another file. "On your knees. Eat off the floor, like the animal you are." You could clearly hear the sound of the plate being thrown on the floor, my sobs, the complete humiliation. Jason turned white as a sheet. You recorded me?" "I did, for months. I have hours of recordings of you insulting me, humiliating me, assaulting me. I have photos of the bruises you gave me. I have everything documented." He stood up from the chair abruptly, anger taking over him. "You can't do this. I'm your son. This is betrayal." "Betrayal?" I stood up too, looking straight into his eyes. "Betrayal is a son treating his mother the way you treat me. Betrayal is forcing me to eat off the floor like an animal. You deserved it. You were always a bad mother. You raised me wrong." "I raised you with love, Jason. I gave you everything I could. You chose to be the man you are today." He tried to grab the cell phone, but I was faster. I put the device in my pocket. "It's no use, son. I've already made copies of everything. It's all saved in multiple places. You can't do this to me. I'm your son, and I'm your mother. Did that give you the right to treat me like an animal?" He started pacing back and forth, nervous, desperate. For the first time since he had started mistreating me, he was afraid. Okay. You want me to change? I'll change. I promise I'll change." "I don't want your promises anymore, Jason. I've heard too many promises." "Then what do you want?" I looked at him, at that 35-year-old man I had raised, whom I had loved unconditionally, whom I had protected from everything and everyone. And I felt pity, but not enough to back down. "I want you to leave my house. Now." "Leave? To where? This is my house too." "No, it's not. This house is in my name. You never contributed anything. You never paid a bill, never worked properly. You're just an invader I tolerated out of love." "You can't kick me out. I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before treating me like garbage." He tried one last card, going back to being the loving son I remembered from his childhood. "Mom, please. I know I was wrong, but I'm your son. You can't abandon me." For a moment, just a moment, my heart softened. I remembered the boy he was, the nights I spent caring for him when he was sick, the smiles he gave me when he was a child. But then I remembered the taste of the food on the floor. I remembered the bruises, the insults, the humiliations. I remembered the woman I had become because of him. "You have two options," I said, looking at the clock on the wall. "Either you pack your things and leave my house in the next 5 minutes, or you wait for the police to arrive and I show them the recordings." "You're bluffing. You would never do that." "Am I bluffing?" I took the cell phone again and dialed 911 in front of him. "Hello, police. I need to cancel a report." "What?" "No, I don't need it anymore, thank you." I hung up and looked at him. "They're already on their way. Now you decide if you want to be here when they arrive." Jason stood still for a few seconds, processing what was happening. For the first time in years, he didn't have control of the situation. For the first time, he was the desperate one. You have no heart," he said, his voice trembling. "I did. You destroyed it." He tried one last time to intimidate me, taking a step forward with that angry face I knew well. "You're going to regret this, old woman. You'll be alone, with no one to take care of you. I'd rather be alone than live with someone who hates me." "I don't hate you." "Yes, you do, and I'm tired of pretending I don't see it." At that moment, we heard the sound of a siren approaching. Jason looked at the window, then at me, then at the window again. "They're coming," I said calmly. Last chance. That's when he broke, completely. He started crying, begging, promising he would change. "Mom, please, I promise I'll be different. I promise I'll work. I'll take care of you. Please don't turn me in to the police." Too late, Jason. You had years to change. You chose not to change. The siren was getting closer and closer. He looked at the stairs, calculating if he had time to grab some things. 5 minutes, I said. Just take the essentials." He ran upstairs, desperately throwing clothes into a suitcase. I heard drawers being opened, things being thrown on the floor. He was in total panic. He came down with a small suitcase and a backpack, his eyes red from crying. "Mom, I don't have money. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore. You're my mother. You have an obligation to help me." My only obligation was to raise you right. I fulfilled my part. The rest was your responsibility. The siren stopped in front of the house. Jason looked at the door, then at me, with desperation in his eyes. "I'm going to tell everyone you kicked me out of the house. I'll tell them you're an unnatural mother. Go ahead. I have recordings that prove why I kicked you out." He opened the door, looked at the police car parked in front of the house, then turned to me one last time. "You're going to regret this, old woman. You'll see what it's like to be alone." I've been alone for years, Jason. The difference is that now I don't have anyone mistreating me. And he left. Left with his suitcases, left with his anger, left with his bitterness, left my house and my life. The police knocked on the door a few minutes later. I explained that it had been a mistake, that I no longer needed their help. They left, and I was alone in my house. For the first time in years, alone and at peace. I sat at the kitchen table and finished the coffee I had prepared. It was cold, but it was the most delicious coffee I had had in a long time. Because it was the first coffee of my freedom. This happened 5 years ago. Today, at 65, I can say it was the best decision I made in my life. In the first months, it was difficult. Jason tried to come back several times, knocking on the door, crying, asking for forgiveness. But I didn't give in. I had drawn a line, and he had crossed it. I heard from neighbors that he went to live with some distant relatives in another state. Then he moved to the city, got a job, even got married. I hope he's changed, that he's become a better person. But that's no longer my concern. Today, I live my life. I have friends, I participate in a craft group at church, I take walks in the morning, I receive visitors, I travel to see relatives, I watch the movies I want to watch. I am the owner of my own life for the first time in years. Sometimes people ask me if I miss him, if I regret what I did. The answer is simple. I don't miss someone who mistreated me. I miss the son he could have been, the son I imagined I was raising. But that son never really existed. I learned that a mother's love doesn't mean accepting anything. I learned that protecting a child sometimes means setting boundaries. I learned that we are not obligated to endure mistreatment just because it comes from someone we love. Today, when I see other mothers going through similar situations, I always give the same advice. Don't accept it. No matter who it is, no matter the relationship, no matter the love you feel. No one has the right to mistreat you. You are valuable. You are important. You deserve respect and dignity. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And to you who have come this far, who have listened to my story to the end, thank you very much. You don't know how important it is for me to be able to share this, to be able to show that it's possible to turn things around, even when it seems impossible. Today, 5 years later, when I wake up in the morning and see the sun coming through my bedroom window, I feel a peace I hadn't known for decades. It's the peace of someone who no longer has to walk on eggshells in their own home, of someone who no longer has to measure every word to avoid irritating anyone. My routine has completely changed. I wake up when I want, have my coffee watching the news at the volume I like, choose the clothes I'm going to wear without anyone complaining that they're ugly or inappropriate. These are small things, but they make all the difference when you've spent years being controlled. I rediscovered pleasures I had forgotten. I went back to cooking for pleasure, not out of obligation. I make those desserts I loved to make when I was young: bread pudding, cornbread, pecan pie. When I finish, I share with the neighbors, who always compliment and ask for the recipes. Mrs. Betty, my 62-year-old neighbor, has become one of my best friends. She told me that during all those years when Jason isolated me, she missed me, wanted to visit me, but noticed that I always made excuses not to receive visitors. "I knew something was wrong, Margaret," she said one day, having coffee in my kitchen. "You had changed, gotten quieter, sadder, but I never imagined it was so serious. Today we visit each other almost every day. She comes to have breakfast with me. I go to have lunch at her house. We talk about everything: our children, our grandchildren, TV shows, neighborhood gossip. It's a true friendship, the kind that makes you feel alive. I also went back to attending church. During the years when Jason controlled me, I rarely managed to go to Sunday service. He always found an excuse, that I had to stay home cooking, that he wasn't feeling well and needed me, that Sunday was a day of rest and I should stay quiet. In reality, he didn't like me going out because he knew at church I would find people who would treat me with kindness, who would remind me that I deserved respect. He preferred to keep me isolated, just with him, where he could control every aspect of my life. Today, I am one of the most dedicated attendees of Grace Baptist Church. I participate in the prayer group, help organize bazaars, take care of the altar flowers. Pastor Mark, who arrived at the parish 2 years ago, always greets me with a smile and asks how I am. "Miss Margaret, you look happier every Sunday that passes," he said the other day. It's beautiful to see this transformation. He doesn't know my complete story, but he notices that something has changed in me. It's that when we free ourselves from an oppressive situation, it shows in our face, in our way of walking, in our smile. One of the things I'm most proud of is having gone back to school. Yes, at 65, I went back to school. I enrolled in an adult education class that the community college offers 3 times a week. It's not that I didn't know how to read and write, but my education was very basic, and I always wanted to learn more. In the class, there are 10 of us ranging in age from 40 to 70. There's Mr. Anthony, who worked his whole life on a farm and never had the opportunity to study. There's Miss Rose, who raised 6 children and now wants to fulfill her dream of reading books. There's John, who lost his wife and decided it was time to do things he had always postponed. Our teacher, Emily, is a 25-year-old girl, full of patience and kindness. She always says she learns more from us than we do from her, because we bring life experiences that enrich the classes. "Miss Margaret, you have an incredible facility for learning," she said in the last class. "You should consider doing the high school program for adults." I'm seriously thinking about that possibility. Who knows, at 65 I might finally get the diploma I always dreamed of. My late Robert would be proud. He always said I was intelligent, that I just needed an opportunity. I also rediscovered the pleasure of gardening. My backyard has turned into a garden. I have roses, carnations, lilies, an apple tree that's starting to bear fruit. I wake up early to water everything, talk to the plants as if they were my friends. Mrs. Thompson, who was the one who guided me about my rights during that difficult time, always stops by to see how I'm doing. She retired from the courthouse, but continues to help women who go through situations of domestic violence. "Margaret, your story should be told," she said the other day, admiring my flower beds. "It could help other women find courage." That's why I decided to share my experience. It's not easy to relive these memories, but if it can help a woman not accept mistreatment, it's worth it. I also have my little luxuries. I buy cooking magazines, watch the movies I want to watch, sleep, and wake up when I want. I can spend my money on what makes me happy: a new lipstick, a cake from the bakery, a gift for a friend. For my last birthday, I turned 65. For the first time in decades, I was able to celebrate as I wanted. I invited my friends from church, made a special lunch, received gifts, laughter, hugs. It was a perfect day. I remembered how my birthdays were when Jason lived here. He never remembered the date, never congratulated me, never made an effort to make the day special. I cooked for him as usual, washed his clothes as usual, was treated with the same coldness as always. Today I realize it wasn't just the obvious mistreatment that hurt me. It was also the lack of affection, the absence of recognition, the feeling that I didn't matter to anyone. It was years of invisibility in my own home. Sometimes, walking around town, I meet people who have known me since I was young. They always make the same comment: "Miss Margaret, you look different, happier, more beautiful." It's true. When we free ourselves from a weight we were carrying, it reflects even in our appearance. I don't hold a grudge against Jason. I hold sadness for the lost opportunity, for the relationship we could have had. But I don't hold hatred. Hatred is a feeling that consumes the one who feels it, not the one who is hated. I prefer to use my energy to build a better life. I heard from a neighbor that he got married and had a daughter. I hope he's a better father than he was a son. I hope he treats his wife with respect, that he doesn't repeat with them the mistakes he made with me. I hope he learned something from everything that happened. But that's no longer my responsibility. My responsibility now is to myself, to my happiness, to my peace. And I can say with all certainty that I've finally found these things. If this story touched you in some way, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to our Grandparents' Tales channel. Your likes and subscriptions give me strength to continue sharing these memories, to show that we are not alone in our struggles. Because life teaches us that there is always a way out, there is always a way to start over. Sometimes it comes disguised as courage, sometimes as dignity, sometimes as self-love. But it always comes. On that Sunday in August, I didn't just kick my son out of the house. I reclaimed my life, my dignity, my peace. And today, 5 years later, I can say with certainty, it was the best decision I ever made. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until the next story.